Hi guys, so I would like to make a response video to V's recent video where he sort of bashed the alternate hypothesis and alt-right's claim on peer review. Now, I didn't have time to watch all the videos, but I got kind of the gist. I kind of understand what they were trying to say because I listened to a very long stream with JF and the alternative hypothesis talking about race and IQ in politics and things like that. Now, I'm not a fan of the alt-right. I'm not a fan of alternative hypothesis. I don't actually find the guy to be particularly smart, even though JF seems to think so. I guess it kind of depends on your threshold, but this guy is essentially like a white segregationist, and I don't want to straw man anything, but I've left the comment on that video, the JF video, interviewing alternative hypothesis, and I left two pretty long comments. You can go read that comment, which sort of lays out many of the problems that he was talking about when it comes to white nationalism and white segregationism. Basically, the gist is that, believe me, it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem that's basically the diminishing of Western values, basically. This is a very complicated topic, and I may be able to go in another video. But anyways, if you judge somebody on arbitrary physical characteristics, is the wrong method. I'm just gonna leave it like that. Now, the alternative hypothesis, apparently some other alt-right people have attacked peer review, and we just sort of made a video, like, pretty much saying that, oh, peer review is, like, the only way we can make sure that the science is legit and it's the best system we have, and etc. And the way that he makes his argument, the way that he makes examples, just pretty much shows to me that he's not involved in the practice of science. I mean, he's a doctor, or he's going to be a doctor, but doctors are not scientists. They're not involved as a career to engage in peer review process. I mean, unless, I don't know, he does some other things I don't know about, but as a doctor, you have to be very knowledgeable. You have to know what to do when you diagnose a disease, but it's different from publishing paper to get a promotion. And I am actually involved in this process, so I can speak from first person perspective. And the thing that annoys me, because like I don't actually care about people's expertise. I mean, I care about their arguments, right? But the thing that kind of annoys me is that we constantly go like, "Oh, I'm an expert, like I'm a doctor, so I know what I'm talking about." It's like no, because if you really know what you're talking about, then the example you give for your argument for defending peer review would be from your personal life, your personal experience, professional experience. You don't have to bring out this bullshit about classroom grading, which is like, I mean, he brings up this example that what do you do when you have two students who should have scored the same, but they are scoring differently, they have different grades, what do you do? And then he said, well, that's a problem, but that's something you have to confront the teacher. Well, here's the problem. What if the teacher is an asshole? What if the teacher likes the teacher's pet, right? Now, the thing that I'm going to address is that, from what I understand from the alt-right, it's not that they're saying that peer review is completely bullshit as a principle or in terms of a spirit, the spirit of peer review in the scientific inquiry. They're saying that, number one, just because the paper is peer review doesn't mean that we can trust the paper. And number two, I think he says something like the alternative hypothesis says that peer review are a bunch of clowns. That's kind of becoming true. And also, it's kind of clear to me that V never read JF's statement. This was published like 2015. Like, it's still on his Facebook. I read it. JF wrote an extremely long explanation for why he ended up quitting academia, some of the problems, and he said that he doesn't really have any solutions, but it's just that academia is becoming less and less honest. They're lacking integrity, and everything's becoming politicized, and this is actually the problem. Now, you can have the best system you can come up with, But if you have a bunch of corrupt people, then you can say that it's bullshit. I mean, it's not a dichotomous thing, but it doesn't mean that it's not a problem, and it doesn't mean that you're saying that it's bullshit. It doesn't have like any grains of truth. So, for example, democracy, we can say, is the best government we can come up with. But let's say if the government is just completely corrupt, like it's supposed to be democratic, but it's really not, because like the system that we have in the United States, where you only have two parties really that people voted on, like it's not really how it's supposed to work. So you can say that, well, the democratic process in the United States currently, it's bullshit, right? So in terms of peer review, one of the major problem is that because everything is becoming so politicized, this publish or perish kind of a paradigm for scientists is just becoming it's just, how should I put it? It's really putting the integrity of the entire discipline in peril. So how does peer review come to be is that it used to be that we only have printed journals that people go read, but that costs paper and resources are limited, and there's only a certain number of articles you can publish. So they have to have a filter, and then so they come up with a system that the experts go and review your paper and decide whether or not it should be accepted or not. But nowadays we have the internet, the information travels very fast, and there are a lot of suggestions saying that maybe instead of going through this process again, we should just make everything online. Like there's no blockade of any kind, and everybody can be able to get access to that information. So that's one. So the fact that we're still keeping this system leads to censorship. So this is one major problem. So if an editor doesn't like your paper, he can basically decide to not publish it for whatever reason. Nowadays, a lot of times, if you try to publish a paper in, let's say, something very controversial like race or IQ, it's going to be automatically rejected, right? Like the editor is not even going to look at it because the editor doesn't want to get his or her hands dirty. So this is the major problem, which means that the trust is kind of gone at this point. So you can pretty much only trust peer review papers in terms of very not controversial topics like physics, like the Large Hadron Collider, and just like really things that are just really not politicized, I guess you could say. That's still fine, right? But anytime you're talking about something that's very much involving anything political, it's difficult to trust anything now just because of this. Because like science is not supposed to be politicized, but it is. That's the reality of the situation right now, and we need to develop a better system. It doesn't mean that we have to get rid of peer review, but it also doesn't mean that peer review is not currently how it's practiced bullshit now. So how do we solve this problem? Well, I mean, again, I don't have the answer to that. It could be that instead of having this blockade of having the editor make the decision to have the paper available online, and let's say you tell people that just because it's not peer reviewed doesn't mean that it's not good science. Maybe you tell people that and anybody can go and have a check at it. And maybe, becoming more libertarian with the information. Like, I don't know. This is a very difficult question to answer, but whether or not we need to change the system so drastically so that it's not anything like the system that we have now, it's very possible. That's what I'm trying to say. Because they're just, right now, it's really just like JF said, it's about cocksucking. That's really what it is. Many times, even when I'm in my discipline, like I know, like for example, my advisor would tell me, well, find out who the editor is, write the editor an email, wink wink, cite the the paper of the editor, cite the paper of your reviewer. No, really, like this relationship thing is what gets people through the door. Like, essentially, that's what it is. And again, like I said, if you are in a discipline like physics, then it's more okay, I think, because it's not so politicized. But if you're in, let's say, biology or psychology or education or any of the more politicized field, it's fair game, honestly. And so I'm just gonna point out several problems that with the current peer review process that people might not know about. Number one, when it comes to paper publishing, if your paper involves something really expensive, so if you're a biologist and it involves like MRA, if it involves like genes or anything, then it's more easy to get published. And sometimes it doesn't even mean that they're good science. It's just that you use some technique that's really, really expensive, then you have a higher likelihood of getting published. Number two is that your relationship, basically. How well do you know the editor? How well do you know your reviewer? And if they like you, if you have a drink with them like every night and they really like you, they'll let you through, and this means that if you don't know them personally, you cite their paper like I talk about, or you email them and you try to hook up with them or something, then then your paper gets through the door much easier. And the third biggest problem is just that, again, like I said, people don't want to get their hands dirty because everything is just so politicized now. So there are certain topics that's just basically a big no-no. And reputable scientists are repeating just a lot of the bullshit that's been pretty much debunked on sites like YouTube, right? But they're repeating the same shit. Like, for example, the other day I listened to a talk by, someone apparently who's pretty famous in his field, and he wants to talk about how to make classroom learning better, and to have the classroom learning come to the 21st century, and immediately he just brings out there's a shortage of women in STEM fields, or mostly he meant technology field. Right? Like, immediately he brings that up, and he's trying to say, oh, maybe we should develop something to help them, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is a problem, blah, blah, blah. I mean, just think about it. If somebody like that makes such, like, stupid statements, right? Then what chance do you have when you're trying to send in a paper saying that, actually, this is not the case? For example, if you want to say, oh, actually, women are not that interested, and women, are much better at doing the stuff that they want to do, and you can implement this, and maybe it will help, but in the long run, you're still going to be seeing like a difference between genders in terms of specializations. And even let's say your program really work, and you start to see more and more women going to coding, they're still going to be coding something different than men. And if your technology becomes big enough, you're still going to see a disparity because men and women tend to specialize in different things. That's tend to be the trend. And if you get enough women into this, it's going to drive the competition up, and men still might get paid more with their stuff, because their stuff might be the more difficult one, the more tedious kind, but it's just as needed or more needed, but they have to spend more time on it. So you're still going to see a wage gap. You're still going to see a gap of a shortage of this thing, right? And then what are you going to do? I mean, what is the time when do you come to the point when you just simply say, you know what, men and women are just kind of different on average, so like, we should just let them be? So when are you going to be able to make that conclusion? Never. That's the thing. So again, V, what I'm trying to say is, you really should open up your mind a little bit more and think about the questions a bit more seriously. Because there is a problem with the current system peer review. We really have no idea how to improve it effectively. We don't. And it's a serious problem. It's not like, oh, here's some exception. No, it's a very, very serious problem. If you're in the social sciences or the natural sciences that deal anything close to with human beings, like right now the situation is just it's very, very bad. Maybe because you're in Romania, you don't feel it. I don't know, but in America, it's pretty horrible. It's just you have to constantly think about what you should or should not say. And if you get on people's bad side, even if your science is good, you're not going to get your paper published. That's just the way it is. So think about it.